Hello and good morning to everyone. We will start our session in a few minutes, just waiting for more attendees to dial in. In about a couple of minutes, we will start. All right, let's get started. So hello and welcome to Wacom Comic Week on this lovely morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining in. Thank you for joining us today on this online event for comics and creativity brought to you by Wacom and Clip Studio Paint. We have a great session waiting for you today with the exceptionally talented Raahega. But before we jump into the session, let me share some of the basic housekeeping rules with you. The session is going to last roughly 1 hour, and we will have time for answering all the questions you might have towards the end. With plenty of folks in the room, we probably won't be able to answer all the questions, but we will do our best. Please use the Q&A function of Zoom for your questions to our presenter and about the presented content. For technical issues like the screen share not functioning properly, or if you are having trouble with the audio, please use the chat box. We are all creatives and enthusiasts of comic and creative arts, so please be kind and do not spam the chat feed. This session is being recorded and it will be available on Wacom YouTube page next week. You will also receive an email next week with links, additional information, and some special offers from our sponsors. If you are new to Zoom, please do check out the gallery view and speaker view options to find the best viewing experience for yourself. Click around freely, you cannot break anything. You can also adjust the slider between the screen share and the camera feed to find the ideal settings for your viewing pleasure. So who we are, a brief summary. For those of you who don't know Wacom, we have been around for more than 35 years, and we are pioneers of digital pen input technology. Every time you need to work or create on a computer and realize that the mouse or the trackpad is not going to do the job, you might want to switch to a Wacom tablet. And the rest of you who know us, it's so nice to see you all here again. This session is brought to you by Clip Studio Paint. Those of you who have been following our online sessions in the past few months are already very familiar with our growing partnership with them. Clip Studio Paint is a versatile graphic software best suited for drawing and painting to create a wide range of content. With a wealth of unique features, it helps to create anything from illustrations over comics to concept art and animation. No matter if professional or a hobbyist, Clip Studio Paint's natural drawing feel, along with its comic features, is loved by artists from all around the world. And last two topics before we start, we have an amazing offer for you all. By visiting our eStore page, estore.wacom.com/comicweek, you can discover the full range of our offers exclusive for those who attend Comic Week. A wide range of Wacom products, including the Wacom Cintiq Pro, Wacom Cintiq, Intuos Pro, and Mobile Studio Pro are waiting for you with up to 20% discount. We also have a special offer from our partner Clip Studio Paint for all the Comic Week participants. Those of you who answer the short Clip Studio Paint survey in our follow-up email after the event will have the chance to win a 3-month license for Clip Studio Paint Pro. The application period is 2 weeks for this survey, and 100 people will be selected out of all participants. Don't miss this chance, and good luck. Okay, it's about time to start. Today we have Raahega with us. She's been cosplaying since 2016. She was featured on many publications and awarded across many conventions. She's very well known for her big winged costumes, and she is a fan of foam. So without further ado, and I know there has been a lot of ado, let's listen to our presenter.
A second, I will start the screen share now.
Yes, of course.
So, welcome everyone to my session. I am Raahega Cosplay, and today I will talk about bringing cosplay from digital into real life. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I'm 27 years old, and cosplay is not my main profession. It is just a hobby. I work full-time as a biology lab technician. So far, I have made 6 cosplays, 2 of which have won an award so far. And I work in a separate crafting room at home. I have extra rented an apartment where I can set up an extra room to craft in and just make a mess without disturbing my boyfriend or my general living space. For working digitally, I have a Windows Surface Pro and also a tower PC with AMD Ryzen 3900K, so 12 core processor, which I desperately need when I do 3D models. My talking points today are a little bit about myself first, my cosplay journey, a very visual journey of my cosplays which I've made, how I improved. And the second talking point is my main talking point, turning something digital real. I will discuss the different approaches and methods I use to turn something like a digital character into real life costume. And the third talking point will be a very short one. I will just share a few tips and tricks from my own experience in case I have inspired you to also make your own cosplay. So this is how I got started back in 2016. I actually got inspired by a friend who was doing her first cosplay as well, and I was helping her a little bit and found out that I have so much fun crafting costumes that I decided I also wanted to make my own costume. This is an own design I made. Maybe some of you could see that it's from Doctor Who, the TARDIS. It's just an inspired armor. I had to make a fast costume because I wanted to wear it to the same convention as my friend. So this was a 2-month build, and everything actually failed. Broke apart the first time I wore it. I didn't make it home with the full costume attached to myself. I had to hot glue and fix it for the second convention day, which everything fell apart again. But I learned a lot making this costume. Also, that I don't like working with thermoplastics, which this costume is made out of. Then a quick overview about my second and third cosplay. The second cosplay is to the left side. It is Witch Mercy from Overwatch. I wanted to make a little bit more simpler costume, so I decided for this outfit because it has a lot of sewing in it. It was also the first time I actually really sewed something, and in the end turned out a little bit more difficult than I expected. Sewing is not as easy as I thought it was. And the wings I made out of EVA foam, which is my favorite crafting material to use. And there I found out how much I like EVA foam for my future project. The little booklet on the side of the hips you can see here is actually an old VHS tape cover, which I covered in thermoplastics. Then my third cosplay is a Monster Hunter armor. And this was a little bit a breakthrough for me because everything that could go wrong went wrong with this costume. There was so much different things to do, details, LED work, a big foam armor that I had to pattern myself, complicated armor, complicated veil at the back, which had to somehow stand out a little bit for it to give the nice effect you see on the right picture. I also learned my signature paint job on this because the first paint job on the left picture was a total disaster. And I looked with other cosplayers for tips and tricks, and some of them gave me very good advice to use a sponge to dabble on the paint on my costumes, and that's how I ended up with a very dynamic paint job in the end. And then I come to my fourth and fifth cosplays, the Valkyries. Maybe some of you have seen them already on the internet. This one went quite viral. As you can see, huge cosplay, and it was also a huge amount of work. I spent about 1,000 hours on the first Valkyrie on this one, alone around 700 hours making the wings. There's also a lot of time, of course, where I had to do research, where I had to try out different methods and approaches into making these wings. They are not very easy to make, of course. They have a span width of 3.5 meters and they weigh about 15 kilograms. And the first time I put the wings on, quickly look in the camera, they stayed like this and then they flopped down like that because I used a PVC pipe as the base for the wings and it did not hold. Luckily, my boyfriend came up with the ingenious idea to use gravity to our advantage. And we put maybe you can see it a little bit on the picture, as fishing rod silk, not a rod, just the silk you use for fishing in between the wings. And that had the effect that the wings held each other up through physics, so they could not flop down to the sides. And it actually worked wonders because I was able to go to one convention with the wings and do a few photo shoots, but then later they still fell apart because of the weight pulling them down. Then the second Valkyrie I made, significantly improvements, of course. The wings had much better stability because I made an aluminium frame as a base. So I could actually move around in this cosplay and also wear them for a bit longer time. This cosplay I can only wear for around an hour before I get back pain and have to take it off. Also, these wings, they weigh around the same as the others, so 15 or 20 kilos. I'm not sure, I haven't stepped on a scale. But the problem is, even though 15 kilos might not be much on the center of your back in a backpack, it is quite a lot spread across 4 meters of wingspan, which these wings have. It puts really much stress on your core back, and you need to balance out because, of course, they don't just stay where they are, they have a little bit of movement in. So I have to take them off after an hour of wearing. This cosplay was the first cosplay I've won something with. It won a second place at the Gamescom cosplay competition this year, which I am super proud of. The first Valkyrie, just to quickly go back, I've also entered in a cosplay competition with. Unfortunately, at that day on the convention, the wings fell apart, which I was actually able to fix with duct tape, so they could at least hold for me to walk over the stage, but I had to hold them with both my hands so that they will not just fall off. So I could not do a performance, which is a big critic point in cosplay judging. So I didn't win anything with this costume. And then to my most recent finished costume, I finished this one just before coronavirus hit. I wanted to have a convention-friendly costume for once, no wings, because wings just obstruct other people and it's not very pleasant to go to convention with big wings. So I made an Vaporeon-inspired armor from Pokemon. Maybe you know this Pokemon. And actually had most fun working on this costume because of all the different details and shapes and also materials I've worked on. For example, the skirt, big skirt is chiffon, which challenged me a lot because I'm not good at sewing. I'd rather make stuff out of foam, but still managed to sew a really nice skirt, which I hand painted, which was the longest, which was the part which took me the longest, around 50 hours, just to hand paint the nice pattern on the skirt and on my arms, and also gluing all the scales on, which are around 450 scales, each individually glued and painted, of course. Also the color, which has a very distinct shape, was very fun to make. And this cosplay actually also won an award. I entered it in the online cosplay competition, which just started to come as the pandemic hit. It was a very big international competition, and it impressed one of the judges so much that he gave me an honorable mentions award, which I'm also very proud of. Then I will quickly stop my screen share to show you a few props on camera. I hope I have the big view here. Yes, thank you. So the first prop I want to show you is a headpiece I made for a Monster Hunter cosplay I started. So this is a headpiece I have made. The little dragon head is 3D printed. And the cool thing about this cosplay was supposed to transform, because in the game, the armor transforms as soon as you draw the weapon. So I added magnets to this, so I can actually have two versions of wearing this headpiece. So the untransformed version, and then I just have magnets attached on the back. And here they are also inside on the back, and I can just attach it back on. And here the magnets are hidden inside the horns. Also here, I put foam clay, which is a type of clay, over the horns, and I can just, a bit hard with one hand, attach it back up, and it holds pretty well. Then I want to show you a head I made a human head. I made this for a cosplayer friend who was cosplaying Kratos, which is also from the God of War games the Valkyries are from. We had a photo shooting together, and he didn't have time to make the Mimir's head for his costume, so I made the head.
That's really super cool.
Thank you. And then I will also show another Valkyrie mask I made. As you can see, I really love the Valkyries from God of War. I didn't want to do the full costume for this Valkyrie, but I really love the mask so much, I just had to make it. And yes, I really love them because they have so many details in the masks. So I actually plan to make more Valkyrie masks just for decoration for myself. Okay, so now I can restart the screen share. Oh, okay, so I want to show you a little bit what I'm currently working on. First, I am working on a group cosplay project. I have made a few friends along the cosplay journey, and they have asked me to join in a group cosplay project, which I gladly accepted, and it is a Viking Norse inspired armor. I will not disclose yet what it is exactly, because my group wants to have a big reveal when the conventions are sometimes in the future back, hopefully. But this is what I can show so far of this cosplay project. Then the next one is Lyra Dawnbringer from Magic the Gathering, basically just a character on a card. I really love this card, and I just got a few years ago into Magic, and I make this costume for entering at the Polymanga Global Easter Cosplay Competition, which I have been asked to be the Swiss representative of, which I'm really looking forward to, and it's a big honor to represent my country in a big international cosplay competition. This is what I have so far. I've already made the upper armor and the shield. Maybe you can also see here in the background a little bit the upper body armor. And lastly, I will do a Aasmar Cleric Mercy fan art. I came across this fan art and I immediately knew I have to make this. As a Mercy main of 1000 hours, I really immediately got caught in this design. I don't like her in-game designs too much because they are too revealing for me to feel comfortable to cosplay in. So this design by Altagast Art on Instagram just immediately took my eye. And this is also a good, sorry, I don't know the English word, it just fell out of my mind. It is a good change to the Lyra Dawnbringer, because Lyra has just a very basic armor with a complicated paint job. And this Mercy skin has a lot of little details where I can either 3D print or work with foam, and of course the wings, which are astral-like wings, and I already have cool ideas how to implement that in real life. So I'm really looking forward to working on this costume. So now we come to my main talking point, which is bringing something digital into real life. So the top picture you see here on the screen is the in-game screenshot, and the bottom picture is the cosplay I have made. And in here I will just talk about my thought processes before I even start making the costume, and then my different approaches and into making different armor parts. And I will also show examples of how you can maybe implement that in your cosplay journey if you would be interested in also starting with cosplay. So this is an in-game screenshot, and this is for the first Valkyrie I made. And the first question everyone has in their mind is, where do I start? Because that was definitely my first question. This is so much here to take in, so much to make. So where do I even start with this costume? And I personally like to have this picture as my desktop background at work, at home, on my phone, maybe even print it out and have it just laying around somewhere, just to look at it during a week or even 2 weeks, just to gather ideas, look if I find every detail in the costume. I also went into the game and tried to beat the Valkyrie a few times. She's an in-game endgame boss, and just to see how she moves, take a lot of screenshots from the game, just to really take in all of her design. And the thing that hit me immediately in this picture or with this Valkyrie was her mask. Her mask is very unique with the white part at the front. And one day I just immediately had the idea, hey, that mask looks like a paper mache mask you can buy in crafting stores for decorating for carnival and such. And this comes to my first approach, which is taking an everyday object and transform it into a costume part. In this case, a simple paper mache mask turning into a very nice costume piece. So here you see a little bit of a progress, what happened to the mask. I didn't really plan much for this. I just started to draw on the mask where I wanted to cut away the mask part. I glued on foam to create a little bit more of a 3-dimension in the mask. And then I just cut away. I like to glue stuff onto an existing base and then just cut away the shape I need. I like to work subtractively and also additionally. And you can see first just a very basic shape of the mask on the left side. The antlers I did separately. I just actually drew them on a piece of paper and just had a tablet with the reference picture in front of me and just tried to copy the shape and size. And here you see a little bit further progress where I already started adding a little bit of details into the mask and also made the antlers look nice. Here everything is glued. The transmission between antler and mask is made a little bit nice. And in the end, the final paint job. For the second mask, I have a little bit more progress pictures taken. Here you really see the draw process on the mask. Also where I started to cut away, where I didn't need the mask parts anymore. And this dark gray material you see here is foam clay. And it is actually one of my favorite materials because it is like clay, normal clay you can buy. But as soon as it dries out, it turns into foam. And this is fantastic because it stays lightweight and you can process it as foam, so you can either sand it or engrave it, which is super fantastic, especially for a mask, for example, which needs to be lightweight because you have to wear it all day. When I was finished drawing the stuff on, I took clear plastic wrap and just traced the rough shape of what I drew on here. And here in the background, in the middle picture, you see a little bit of a paper reference I made. I just cut out the plastic wrap where I painted my pattern on, traced it onto paper, put the paper back on just to see if it fits or if I needed to make a little bit bigger or smaller. And then when I was happy, traced it onto foam and could glue the foam just on my mask. Here is a little bit more process. I also sculpted a little bit around the eyes to just give it a little bit more 3 dimensions. I don't like my stuff looking very flat. So sometimes, even though the reference doesn't have much of dimension in it, I still add a little bit because I want my costume parts to look like they're real armor parts, not just taken out of a comic and put into real life. Here you can see a little bit of how I made the helmet. I took a styrofoam head and wrapped it in plastic wrap, covered it in duct tape so I could make a pattern for it. The duct tape I just cut out and could trace it onto foam and had my helmet already. I have a very tiny head, so I could just pattern it off a styrofoam head. For the horns, I had to get a little bit creative. I wanted to have them dimensionally available so I could see if I like the dimension, the size, the thickness of them. So I just took aluminium foil, scrunched it together, put it into the right size and shape, pinned it onto my head, and when I was happy with the result, I traced it onto foam. Also put a few foam sheets together so I get a little bit of a thickness for the horns because I wanted them to have the real ram horn look, and then carved it and sanded them so they have the smooth finish. Glued it onto my nice head, which looked a little bit still yucky. So I went ahead with the foam clay again to just make the transmission between mask and horn very nice. That's why I really love this material. You don't have to work very accurately from the start. As you can see here, this is just glued something on a part, and then through the foam clay actually give him shape and make it look nice. Like I said, I work additionally and not just start doing the piece by start perfect. I like to, yeah, like I said, I like to make the piece through little tricks like this perfect. Once it was dry, I could also engrave it, as you can see here. Then I covered it in black primer. It is important to cover your stuff in primer so the paint job then sticks to the foam. And then I painted it with simple acrylics. I also took my painting technique where I take a sponge, I dabble the sponge in acrylics, then put the excess paint onto paper, and then just dab the color onto my costume. The good thing about this technique is it gives you dimension in your build. It gives you on the side of your, how do I say, on the sides, it gives you a little bit less color, so it gives it shade, it gives it more dimension, and this happens automatically when you use the use the sponge for it, which is actually a really cool and simple way to paint your props. Here, same principle again. I used a basic styrofoam head, a male styrofoam head, to sculpt the Mimir, the old man, onto it. And of course, this makes it much easier to start with a base that already has a human face, and then you add the features of this person through the foam clay, or if you prefer also normal clay with it, instead of starting at a simple clay clump and then having to model this out of the clay clump. This already gives you a guideline where the eyes are, where the nose is, around how big the nose is. Of course, I made the nose a bit bigger because the old man has big nose, and give him the distinct wrinkles to the side. So you can be very creative with this approach of taking objects that already exist and turning it into your own unique prop. For the beard, I just got a old man beard, Halloween beard, and glued it onto this mannequin, and I could just cut him the right, give him the nice trim of the beard, and then I added a few details and the robe, and already had my finished old man face by just simply using something pre-existing and turning it into this. And this, of course, can be applied to different skill levels. If you're new and start with cosplay and you want to make a wizard's book, you don't need to actually make a book out of foam or thermoplastics. You can maybe take an old book you don't need and cover it in fake leather, and just maybe weather it with a cutter or with heat, and already have a nice wizard's book without actually having to build the book yourself. Or I, like I did with the Mercy, I took an old VHS tape cover. They look like books because the VHS were very thick, and I just covered that in thermoplastic, and I already had my nice book. So of course, back to the Valkyrie, I have the mask now, but what about the wings? I cannot just make the wings out of any everyday object. It doesn't exist like this, so this has a complicated approach to it. So my next method is also using a pre-made pattern. And of course, nobody has made a pattern for this costume, so I had to get creative. I took a lot of in-game screenshots, which were not helping at all because they were either a little bit blurry and you could not see all the details, and getting the Valkyrie to stand perfectly still while she's trying to attack you all the time, it just didn't work very well. So I Googled who was the art designer of the game and found his art station. One of the art designers was Igor Kato, and on ArtStation, he actually uploaded the in-game model for one of the Valkyries. Not the one I was making, but they all have the same wings. So for me, perfect. I found my perfect reference for my wings. So what I proceeded to do was very basic photoshopping. I basically cut away the Valkyrie because I don't need her, and cut away the black stuff around. And what I did then is print it out, scaled up. So via PDF, I was able to scale up the print and print it out. I don't know how, it was, I think 500%. I could also say I wanted it 1.2 meters wide, and printed out over several pages, used several cartridges of ink, and then checked the size with my mannequin if I was happy. Now I have a perfect pattern for the wings, because what I can do now is cut out one of these buttons, for example, and I have the perfect paper pattern for the buttons I can use to put on foam and then cut the foam out with. Same thing for these scale-alike looking feathers. I also just needed to cut out one of them and could just copy it 240 times onto EVA foam and cut that out. For the big long feathers, it was also coming in very useful. I could also cut them out and just have the perfect size and shape for the big wings, or for the big feathers, and could just trace it onto EVA foam and cut it out. Then, of course, I had to reassemble the big puzzle, because in the end there were around 500 pieces, individual pieces I had to put back together. And for that purpose, I had a second reference printed out, laid out on the floor, and actually just glued everything on the top of my reference. As you can see here, I laid out all the big feathers the way it was down on my reference, so I could actually be as accurate as possible. Of course, I had to make a few adjustments because I made the wings to be able to be taken apart into two pieces for transportation. So I had to adjust the angle of a few long feathers of the big outside wing so it fits perfectly onto the small wing. But this way, it gives you a very good guideline how to put together your big complicated costume. I also like to use patterns for stuff like Celtic knots. I have no idea how to design these Celtic knots or how they could be authentic and accurate. So what I did was print out upscaled references, which I could just trace onto my foam and cut it out and engrave it a little bit, and then put onto my Viking inspired armor. And of course, there's a lot of cosplayers out there that make a living by selling their patterns they make, which can come very useful if you want to maybe make an own design and you need a space-like breast armor, which here is the base for. The pattern is by Kamui Cosplay. She is, I think, most famous for her very useful patterns you can buy. You can also buy patterns of horns or skulls or male breastplates or arm plates, basically everything you can buy patterns from. I sometimes like to use it when I make own designs just to have a base. Like I said, I like to have just a very simple base I can start working my costume up upon. So like you have in Clip Studio layers, I like to have a very basic layer with a basic shape and then start to add more layers of details onto it. Also a great way when you start with cosplay and you have no idea how to make your own patterns and it looks so complicated, I will always advise, if you really consider this, to buy patterns of other cosplayers, because well, for one, you support small businesses and people are currently struggling in the pandemic, of course, and secondly, it makes your life a little bit easier. There are also cosplayers out there that sell patterns for whole costumes. So maybe if you like a very popular character from League of Legends, for example, check out if one of the cosplayer has already made a pattern. Makes your start into cosplay much easy. Then of course you can also make your own pattern, which is mostly my approach, besides building up upon existing materials and existing objects. I go very simple with this. I just glue together a few pieces of paper and pin it onto my mannequin. Then I just draw the basic shape I want around the size I want onto it and make a nice paper pattern out of that and then trace it onto EVA foam. And I already have my very unique mermaid tail. For the bat wing-like skirt you can see on the right side, I also had to make my own pattern because there was none available. So what I also just did is put together a few pieces of paper, pin it around my mannequin, only draw one half of it because I could mirror the other half, and then transformed my paper pattern onto EVA foam and also used a little bit of heat to shape the EVA foam into this round shape you see here. And I already had my basic finished skirt for my cosplay. Sometimes I also like to pattern directly off paper. So I just start out by drawing my pattern on the paper and then just stick to my head in this example and see if I like the size. And if it's too small, I usually scan it into the computer and then scale it up in Photoshop or in PDF and print it out 100% scale or 130%, and then go back to see if it fits onto my head, if it looks good, and if not, I will still make adjustments in size. And then when I've done that, I can trace it onto EVA foam and have my finished product. There's also a very popular methods most cosplayers use is wrapping themselves up in plastic wrap and duct taping body parts to directly pattern perfectly fitting armor pieces. I could not show good pictures because it's hard to take pictures when you're wrapped yourself around in duct tape and plastic wrap, but the principle is very easy. Plastic wrap around so the duct tape doesn't stick to your body or your reference. Duct tape over it, draw how the shape you want. For round shapes, I always recommend using more panels, especially with EVA foam, because it is not that much flexible, or it doesn't take a round shape so good. And then you can just cut it out along the lines you have drawn and put it onto EVA foam and glue it back together. And you already have your basic shape for the helmet. Like I said, I like to use it for making very good fitting armor pieces, especially us women who need a nice waist and breast fitting armor piece. It comes perfect to do this. It is tailored to your own body and figure. And now I will show you a little bit how I do a little bit of digital patterning. Just quickly go into Clip Studio. So the example is also the red Monster Hunter headpiece I showed before. The problem with this is it changes its shape when it's transformed in game, and you don't have any pictures of that. So what I had to do is take a game screenshot and then started to draw over it. I will zoom a bit in. Started just to copy the shape over it. What I saw and what I didn't see because it's covered by the sword, I just had to use my imagination or look from another angle how it would look. And then I ended up with a very basic shape, which I then copied again on a layer on top and made it look very nice. Now this pattern I didn't print out, I just used it as a digital reference to draw my paper pattern, because I had to adjust the shape a little bit so I could still see underneath through it. I could not just make it go down to my lips. I had to make it a little bit more another angle so I could still see. Then, for example, we take my Lyra Dawnbringer, which has very big wings, but the problem is half of them is cut out. And this is the only picture existing of her because she's a Magic the Gathering card. So what do? So I had the idea to just come up with my own design of the wings, because I was also a little bit unhappy on how basic her wings look, and I love making lots of little details. So I decided just to draw my own wings. So I just started with a basic wing structure, very rudimentarily drawn, just ugly feathers drawn, just to see if it actually would fit onto Lyra, and then laid it over her, and just to check the size, if I was happy with the sizing and the scale of the wings, which I was. I then continued to draw over it to give each feather a distinct shape and a unique shape, and then ended up with this as the result. I also laid it back over Lyra just to see if I like her with these special type of feathers, which I personally really do. And now I have my perfect reference picture to print out and pattern directly off of this, like I did with the Valkyrie wings. Gives me a great opportunity to make each feather separately different, has a different shape, has a different angle, while then in the end still being able to bring it back together without her looking like a plucked chicken, or just showing the attachments below. And the last digital patterning I just recently started to make is to directly make the pattern digital and print it out to use as a normal paper pattern for armor pieces. So here the problem is half of the headpiece is covered in her hair. So I just firstly quickly drew over it, copied the shape just to check if it fits perfectly, also continued down her, what I think it would look like below her hair. Then, of course, I just traced it again, made it a little bit thicker because the perspective is not the same as it would be from the side. So I adjusted the perspective. I ended up with a basic shape, and then I added details and made everything very nice. And this now I can just print out and copy trace it onto EVA foam and have a very easy pattern for me to make. So I will go back into the PowerPoint. Okay. And of course, lastly but not least, I also use a little bit of 3D modeling and 3D printing. I used to 3D model in Blender, now not anymore because it's a little bit too complicated with mouse and keyboard. I have a resin printer, which is perfect for little things. It is not a big printer, but it is enough for my purposes. I wanted it to have very good details in very small prints. And here, for example, I made the dragon head for this headpiece. Here's another dragon head I made for a Valkyrie mask. As you can see, through the resin print, you get very good details, even in a small, tiny printout, which I then needed as the top part for the Valkyrie mask I made. Here, for example, I needed 3 of these little Valkyries for the Mercy stuff. And for me, it takes longer to model this out of clay, make a silicone mold, and then cast resin this little figurine which then needs to dry off for a few days before you can make the second one and before you can make the third one. So for me, I went into 3D modeling. This one I 3D modeled in ZBrush on my Wacom tablet, Wacom Cintiq 16 Pro, and could actually very good use the reference and copy what I saw and print out the figurine. I also like to use it as a small button parts. I will need for the costume, I think it was 12 or 14 of those little buttons. And this is perfect because, as you can see here, even the little one has very good details in it, and I need them as small as this little one, which would, if I would make this by hand, be very difficult to make 14 times. But with a 3D printer, I can just print it even in one go 14 times because the resin printer can print more models at once. In the end, of course, I combine all methods, like here for the Vaporeon, I had to self-made the pattern for the color, this one, to have the distinct Vaporeon shape. But I actually used a pre-made pattern I bought off another cosplayer as a base for the breast armor, which I then could start gluing the foam scales onto it and to cut its distinct shape out. For the headpiece, like I said, the dragon head is 3D printed. I had to make my own pattern for the helmet, and I also drew a digital reference on my draw pad for this. And the last one is also dragon head 3D printed. The big side wings, I had to make my own pattern. So basically just printed out an in-game screenshot from the side of her and just cut out that part from the paper and traced it onto foam. And I also used a paper mache mask as a base, which I can then form the very nice face the mask has. So now we come to my last point, which is a few tips and tricks from me. If you want to start with cosplay, maybe I've inspired you, maybe you've been thinking about starting for a while. And I will go over choosing the right character for your first cosplay, a few go through materials and tools I use and my preferences, and then at the end a few tips I just generally give as advice. First question probably is, yes, you can buy your cosplay. There's nothing wrong with buying cosplay. I will not cover this too deep because I have never bought a cosplay. Just be careful if you buy it from online stores like Wish. I know that they don't have good qualities from friends. And you can also always commission another cosplayer who's working like to make the costume of your dreams for you. And also, like I said, supports them with their small businesses. Then what to cosplay is probably the biggest question. For me, it is always choosing my favorite character, which I like. Of course, if now your character is, for example, Reinhardt from Overwatch, who wears this big armor, and you say, okay, I cannot do this as my first cosplay, maybe look into alternative skins and outfits that might be a bit easier for you to craft, maybe not as much armor pieces, or has maybe a little bit more casual attire. And then, of course, also look into fan art, like I did with Mercy. I don't like her in-game skins too much because they're too sexy for my liking. I would not feel comfortable wearing this. So when I found fan art I really liked, why not? She's my favorite character, so I immediately went for it. And also my biggest advice, maybe go with an own design, which is tailored to your skills and needs. So maybe you're really good already at sewing, because sometimes you sew your own clothes, but you're not comfortable with doing big shoulder armor or collars like this or headpieces, but you still want a few armor parts. You can draw either your own character or commission an artist to draw a character for you which fits your skills and needs. Say make a fancy dress or a fancy outfit, and then maybe just try on arm armor or leg armor, which is just fitted to your personal preference of the character, and you can just leave away the big shoulder parts. Also, the good thing about that is when you go to a convention and it's not accurate because you left something away, nobody will notice. I'm quickly covering materials and tools, Warbler versus foam. I quickly stop the screen share to show on camera. So Warbler is a thermoplastics, which is heat shapeable. The cool thing about this is it is very robust and very hard. Basically, all you have to do is cut out the shape, heat it with a hair dryer even, or a heat gun, and then you can just wrap it around the body part you want, wait until it's cool off, and then you can immediately take it off, and you have a perfectly fitting armor, for example. I really like this material for making stable stuff that should not be too flexible, because once it's not dried, it's cooled off, stays in that form. And my only gripe with this is it's very expensive, and if you make a big breast part out of it like this, you cannot really move in that or breathe. And this is my biggest con on this material. Also, it is very heavy, so if you make this headpiece, if I would make it out of Warbler, it would be too much of a weight on my head to wear all day. Then I have EVA foam, so everything I'm wearing is EVA foam. This is EVA foam. The mask in the background is EVA foam, and I really love this material. I can show here unfinished leg bracer. I really love it because it does this. You can move in it freely as you want, and the cool thing is you can stretch it and let it go, and it goes back into its default position. You can also take a hairdryer or a heat gun to shape it a little bit, and it does take very good a shape, but Warbler would of course be very better fitting. But this of course leaves room for breathing, for moving, or even if you make a costume and you gain a few kilos, it doesn't matter, you can still wear it because it's super flexible. What I also like is that you can engrave it with heat tools and cut little details, and overall it is my favorite material just because it's so lightweight, it is so flexible, and also the cost, it doesn't cost a lot to have this and to buy it, of course, whereas Warbler is a little bit more expensive material. So quickly to my few last pages. Yeah, here a few examples again. You can carve the foam, or with a wood burner also give it different shapes, or burn different shapes into it to create different texture in your foam. Or even you can use a cutter to give it a very, very thin and fine texture in the foam. This here is foam clay, which I rolled into a roll, let it dry, and then you can use it to give your scale, for example, a three-dimensional look. And of course, I classify foam clay as foam because once it's dry, it turns into EVA foam. So of course, this is perfect for sculpting. Also, foam clay just attaches onto foam and really holds onto it, so you don't need to glue that stuff onto your costume part. Here another example of the mask I made. Also, you can make a book out of foam, very lightweight. You can carry it around the whole day. As I said, can be heat formable to give your page a little bit of a curve in it, so it looks a little bit more like a old wizard book, for example. I also sometimes use a combination of both. Here on this mask, for example, the brown part is Warbler, I had to make this a little bit more stable, otherwise the side wings would flop down. So it's perfect to give your prop a little bit more stability, but overall keeping it still very lightweight for you to wear the mask, for example, the whole day. And now a few things, just a few points I want to mention is your stuff will fail, and that is okay. You try to bring something that doesn't exist, a very complicated design, which is just in games or on paper, into real life. And of course, sometimes it just doesn't work like you imagined, and you have to go in and change a few things so you can wear it and still move in it, for example. Also, trying out different ideas is something I always want to put out, because don't just have one idea and try to push really that idea through. If it doesn't work, try something else. Sometimes you'll be surprised that your main approach is actually not the best approach to whatever you were trying to do. And if something breaks, everything can be repaired. I had to learn this lesson as well. I was very devastated the first time my Valkyrie wings fell apart, but I quickly learned that you can still somehow always try to just, even if it doesn't maybe look as good afterwards, but still you will always find a way to repair something, or in the worst case, remake it. I also like to ask other cosplayers for help. We are a very welcoming and wholesome community, in my opinion. You can always ask your favorite cosplayer for help. If you're struggling with a certain costume part, I always, I also, when I was making the Valkyries, was writing with a lot of other girls who were also working on their version of the Valkyries. So we exchanged ideas and tips and tricks for wings and masks and whatnot, and it helped me a lot to make my own costume. I also like to say watch as much tutorials as you can and follow so many different cosplayers you can find. Everyone works differently, everyone has different ideas and different approaches, and it is always a good inspiration for me to see other people make their costume. Maybe sometimes I find a method I have never thought of before, very simple, but it never came to my mind and I could apply it to my own workflow. And of course, practice makes perfect. My first few cosplays were not very good, fell apart all the time. But of course, whenever I failed, I learned something new. And like I said, I like to say, there's always something new to learn. Always be open to new methods and ideas from other people. And yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Raahega. That was great. That was really impressive. We had lots of great positive comments from the audience, as well as some very interesting questions. So if it's okay for you, I would like to share with you some of those questions.
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah. So obviously there was big interest on the wing costume, the Valkyries, and there was this interesting question about, like, do you have any plans of revisiting those costumes and maybe redoing some wings using maybe hydraulics or some other materials and techniques?
Um, so I will not say a little bit traumatized, but kind of am a little bit traumatized for making two of these costumes, because the wing work is very monotone. Like you see the big
Mm-hmm.
feathers, they all look a little bit the same. So I just sat in my little room for days and months, just engraving the same thing over and over again and painting over and over, which at the end, of course, the result is stunning and worth it. But I personally said I will not go back to the Valkyries and redo one of them. I will though make the masks because I really like the masks to have as decoration. But there are so many other wonderful winged creatures out there that still need to be still need to be done.
I completely understand the feeling, and this is actually a great segue to another question. While listening to you, I also noticed that, like, this is a lot of repetitive work. And do you have any tips and tricks? Because I mean, it might not necessarily have to be 500 pieces of repetitiveness, but there is when you're looking into costumes and patterns and etc. There is a repetition in pretty much every costume. Like, what are your tips and hints when working on something that you do over and over and over, but not to get super bored or frustrated? Because I noticed there was a tablet with, I think it was Benjamin Button, a movie was playing on it. Yeah, I was just curious. What are your tips for dealing with that repetitiveness?
Yes, so I always have my tablet open on the side to watch Netflix series. I have actually watched through many, many Netflix series during the process. I also recently started to listening to podcasts, which also is a good way to keep you sane, as I like to say.
Mhm.
And with the new costume I make, the Lyra Dawnbringer you see on screen,
Mhm.
while it doesn't look like much, the paint job on this takes me ages and up to 10 to 15 hours each piece. And for keeping my sanity and not having to be monotone all the time, that's why I decided to make another costume on the side. So I will be switching back and forth between both costumes. So I will have the change in between, which I need to keep me motivated to work. Because I noticed when I started on this and I made lots of pieces, such in behind each other. I don't know the English word for it,
Mhm.
sorry.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then I noticed I was feeling kind of burned out of painting
Mhm.
these color patterns all the time. Even though the first piece was so much fun, progressively I started to feel burned out.
Mhm.
So that's why I decided to start on a second cosplay, just to keep me motivated, because I notice now that I feel more motivated to do stuff again. So this is maybe
That's
my
a
trick.
great hint actually. Like keeping, maybe having multiple projects running to keep yourself motivated and to switch your focus from one technique to another can also help dealing with the whole process.
Yes, or the one I'm wearing now. I was having so much fun with it because it has so many different shapes and materials used to it. Like the color is very different to all the scale stuff I had to do, or even the shoulder pads, which also
Mm-hmm.
have a very distinct shape. With it going upwards was also
Yes,
very challenging to do, but it gave me the change in the costume itself, which I needed to keep on working on it.
that's true. That's true. And you mentioned that you actually have a day job and you are doing cosplay also. How do you manage the time? The working on the costumes, because like you said you spent almost like 1,000 hours on the Valkyrie. It's a lot of work, and we have seen how meticulous you are in the details and everything. Like, how do you keep the balance? How do you juggle both your work and costume creation?
Um, so my work is actually very awesome because we have flexible working time. So in the morning, I just can come when I want, and then I need to work my 8.5 hours a day, and then I can go home. And I can also, if I make plus hours, I can also take them as a free afternoon. If I have, let's say, 3 or 4 hours plus, I can go 3 or 4 hours home earlier if I am done with the work for the day. So this gives me, of course, a lot of flexibility to come in very early also in at work and then work until 3 or 4 and then go home and still have time in the afternoon to craft a little bit. I usually like to craft 1 or 2 hours a day on the costume part. If on the weekend, if I haven't planned anything, a little bit longer. But then also sometimes if I don't feel like it, I just don't craft at it at all and spend my time otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. Um, okay, just looking at the questions. Um, yeah, actually, we have all seen that you are very resourceful when it comes to coming up with creative solutions. The way that you used a lot of ink toners and papers as a pattern for your wings, or the magnets for the dragon helmet. When you first started and during your first couple of costumes, how much of this resourcefulness you realized that it was something that you had, and how much of it you had to research and ask and follow and discover?
Yeah, so I think my mother would always say I was always a very creative little kid. So I would always come up with fun things I could maybe change or craft. Wait, just go a little bit back to my first costumes. So yeah, the first costume, of course, was just trial and error.
Hmm.
Um, I was just doing whatever I didn't really have a plan for it. I was just cutting out and just trying out stuff, and this is what I ended up with. So the first costume, I just watched a lot of tutorials how to work with Warbler. This is
Hmm.
actually a Warbler costume, the
Hmm.
first one. Just looked up how to shape it and how to form it and how to paint it. But the rest is actually just trial and error because I was just thinking, oh yeah, let's just try. Nobody will notice anyway because it's an own design.
Hmm.
Nobody knows how the original should look like. Not even I know the original actually, which sketched on a piece of paper, looked totally different than what I ended up with. And also in the Mercy, I actually also tried to be resourcefulness for the leggings you see, or the
Hmm.
stockings. I actually took old leggings which I cut and put in a I don't know the English word for it, so it stays up
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
yeah, an elastic span. So it's
Suspenders, I think.
yes,
Hmm.
so it stays up. Or the little booklet, like I said, is a VHS tape cover, and this was just
That's
something
ingenious.
that suddenly hit me because I wanted to watch an old Disney movie. We still had a VHS tape player, so I just take that out, and I was like, oh, this looks like a book. And then I just suddenly had the idea that I can use it for my Mercy cosplay. And
That's
then sometimes, of course, I follow a lot of people on social media, a lot of cosplayers, and sometimes I see genius ideas from others, and I was like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. I will also try to do that in my next costume.
there are definitely a lot of super inspiring content and costumes and illustrations out there. And looking at the future, like, is there a specific cosplay that you want to do, but still maybe time, maybe it's a little bit it looks scary for you. Like, is there some goal that you have?
Yes, there is actually one thing which I don't think is actually physically possible, but I will at some point attempt to do this if when I live in a bigger apartment, because now I do not have the space for that. And it is a, oh, surprise, surprise, another Valkyrie. But it's a artwork. I don't remember the artist. I would have to look it up. But basically, it is a harpy human mix up, and she
Oh,
has wings that are 4 meters high and 3 meters wide,
wow.
and has also bird-like legs,
Mm-hmm.
which would also mean I would need to make stilts to walk in.
Mm-hmm.
So this is definitely something I will want to make in the future, but first I would need to move into a bigger working space.
That would definitely take up a lot of space.
Mhm.
How big is your current space, and how much, or better question would be, what would be the minimum ideal working space to start building cosplay, in your opinion?
So currently I have a 9 square meter room,
Mm-hmm.
which in my opinion is actually a perfect perfect size to get started with cosplay. I have space for three tables in it, one for a sewing machine, one is my main working table, and one is for the 3D printers. I also have enough space for a few shelves, but also enough floor space to make even the Valkyrie wings did fit into this little room.
Oh.
But for the first cosplay, it depends on how complicated you want to make it. Living room or kitchen table or whatever space you find is actually enough. Like I said, the Valkyrie wings, they are big, especially the orange ones. They have a 2 meter diameter each. So they actually did not fit anymore into my little room. So I had to make them in two separate pieces, which I then later could just put together, which saved me, of course, a lot of space.
Yeah, it also probably makes it easier to transport them.
Yes, of course, yeah.
You went through a lot of the way that you also how you incorporate digital design and 3D design into your creation and planning process. Like how would you rate looking behind like what's the ratio of digital versus actual traditional planning, DIY planning? Not the not the cosplay creation, which is obviously purely a DIY process, but actually the planning, the designing is, if not equal, almost as big of a time invested in your cosplay. How would you rate the ratio of digital in that part?
So for me, because I like to do a lot of research, watch a lot of tutorials, figuring out which materials I want to use, where I want to attach everything, I say digital actually takes up a lot of space compared to traditional planning. I would even say 70% is digital planning at this point I am now. Compared to traditional planning, I used to, of course, use paper and pen to write down or to sketch out my ideas. But now I like to actually use the digital patterning or the digital planning because I can directly go over to the patterning stuff. And of course, I also count research as digital planning. And I really spent a lot of time watching looking at inspiring people or other cosplayers or just also crafting channels even just to get a few little ideas I could maybe incorporate in my build.
That's great. That's great. Let's go to the last question. You had some very nice tips of using what you have, as you phrased it. What would be your must-have 5 tools for a cosplayer? Like at the
Mhm.
beginning, everything else it's good they help, but you cannot do it without these 5 things. What would you say?
Yeah, so the most important thing, in my opinion, is no matter which material you use, is the heat gun. I can maybe quickly, this thing here, the heat gun. It is good for EVA foam, giving it shape, also closing the pores of the EVA foam to get a better paint job. It's also great for Warbler to just heat it up and bring it into shape. And I think this is a must. At first I had a hair dryer. It does work. It does work, but using a real heat gun speeds up your crafting process a significant amount of time. And then the second tool is, of course, the the old and beloved hot glue gun. uh, yeah, I try to get a bit away from hot glue because I think sometimes it just doesn't hold good enough. I personally use contact cement for a lot of my things. It just it's like cement. Once you glue two foam pieces together, there's no way you can separate that again without destroying the whole prop.
Wow.
Which I is good for things like the Valkyrie wings that really need to hold, or a breastplate that when you move and breathe also needs to have enough stability to hold together.
Yes, yes, you're right.
Yeah. And the third one is a respirator. Really do your health a favor and get a respirator because I see so many cosplayers work without one, and just like I said, the contact cement I use has acetone. Don't know if the English chemical is also called acetone,
Yes.
but has acetone in it, which can seriously damage your respiratory system if you don't wear a mask. So I don't just wear the normal face masks. You have to just a second.
Yes.
So I don't just wear a face mask like you're required to wear everywhere. I wear a real respirator
Oh,
with
yes.
an organic filters because I wasn't sure exactly what all the ingredients are in my glue. So I would always recommend wearing this no matter with which glue you work. Also when heating up your EVA foam or your warbler. It stings. And in my opinion, yes, I just try to be safe, rather safe than sorry. So I always actually wear this, except if I'm painting. Also, of course, if you have an airbrush and you paint with an airbrush, you also need to wear one of these because the little particles of the colors fly around. Or if you're sanding something, little dust build up in your lungs can be lethal. So must,
No, that's true. That's true. Like safety first. It's
yeah,
it's
safety first.
really a key
Mhm.
addition.
And then I would also say having the right paint. I know this can be overlooked a little bit, but I have tried out so many different brands of acrylics and paint, and I've come to the conclusion that it does make a significant difference which paint you use for in the end the paint shop to look like it does on my Valkyrie wings. I always like to say 50% is the quality of the paint you buy. So good paint is in my opinion also a must for every cosplayer.
That's true. That's true.
And lastly, I'm gonna say probably a wide range of scissors and cutting tools. Because especially if you work with EVA foam and you want to have the nice edges on your costume parts, you need a very good blade to cut your EVA foam so you don't have a little stutters in it. Of course, you can go as far and buy a rotary uh, sanding tool like a Dremel to also make the edges nice. But that, and at the other hand, also makes a lot of dust again. And you can also hand sand it if you don't have a lot of pieces. But yeah, I think these are the tools that are needed. And the Dremel, for example, is good for EVA foam, but not really necessary for Warbler.
Okay. So to summarize it, you need a respirator because to keep yourself safe and to prioritize your health, a heat gun, a hot glue, and then you need good paint and things with sharp ends.
Yes.
Perfect. That's great. Yeah, quickly checking. We have a lot of questions about the specific materials you use and where you
Mhm.
get your materials. So I think those will be something interesting. Maybe you might think of sharing that on your Instagram.
Mhm.
That will definitely be a lot of people would love to hear about and learn more about those things. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left to go through those details, but that's definitely something. And actually, let me share my screen and let's go through our second step. Please let me know if you can see.
Yes.
Great. So, to wrap up, thank you, all of you, for joining our session. And thank you, Raahega, Romina, for for your very inspiring and at least for me very educational session that you had your presentation. Please don't forget to follow her on social media on Instagram at Raahega_cosplay. Um, she has amazing content, constantly stories and postings, very responsive, an amazing human being overall. And also, don't forget to visit our e-store to see the full extent of your exclusive Comic Week offers, including Wacom Cintiq Pro 24 and 16, Wacom Cintiq, and Mobile Studio Pro. And that's all from us today. And coming up next, we have at 2 p.m. we have our next session with the Triggerfish Foundation artists understanding storyboarding. It's also a must-watch session, so I highly advise to join that session as well. And yes, that's all from us for this morning, for today. Thank you all very much. Once again, thank you, Romina, for being here today with us.
Yeah, thank you
Hope
for
to see
having
you all
me.
later, and bye-bye.
Bye.